Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name's Jess and this is my very first YouTube video, and I thought I would start my channel off by talking about something that I'm really enjoying doing at the minute. Well, actually, I enjoy doing it all the time, but it's reading. I'm actually going to start off by talking about all of the books that I read in August. So it was actually a really good reading month for me. I've counted up and I got through 13 books. I'd say this was quite a mixed bag, to be honest. There were some that I really enjoyed, some which were like a bit of a flop. We're going to talk about all of them. So generally the sort of books that I really like reading at the minute are like romance, but there's like a few fantasy in there as well. I do want to start reading a few more like crime books and things like that, but generally it's like all romance today. And also I tend to get a lot of my books from the library just because it's cheaper and I just really enjoy going. So most of them I'm going to be showing you on my iPad, and I've just got a couple physical ones. So let's get into the books. The first book that I read in August was Corrupt by Penelope Douglas. This book is like enemies to lovers, but the extreme end of the scale. The two main people in the book are Erica and Michael is Erica's ex-boyfriend's brother. So they've always grown up around each other, but he moved off to university a couple years before. Now she's grown up a bit, she's moving away. She wants to move away, get a fresh start, and happens to be going to like the same city that he is at uni at. He's now like a big basketball star as well. Although they seem to like get on when they were younger, he's now turned like completely against her. She's praying that like she doesn't bump into him. Anyway, like the story unfolds and he is just horrible to her. Like he has a couple friends that live with him and they're all just awful to her. And that's why I was a bit not quite comfortable with it at points, because I don't mind enemies to lovers, but I feel like sometimes it just went a little bit too far. So yeah, you don't know why he's being horrible, and there's so many twists, it's so dramatic. The story ended a bit too quickly for me. I feel like it needed to be spread out a little bit. So I'd say if you want to try enemies to lovers, Penelope Douglas, go for either Bully or Punk 57, maybe before this one. This one's a bit older, a bit steamier, a bit more extreme. So the next book that I read was It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, who is the queen of romances. I always see her books like all over TikTok. This second book is about a girl called Lily. She is in New York and she has this like romantic encounter, like proper book moment, with this guy called Ryle, and he's a doctor, and she's really starting to like him, and meanwhile setting up her own business. And then she bumps into her first love, like coincidentally, called Atlas, and she basically goes back to her diaries from when she was younger and is reading about her first love with Atlas. So you kind of have like the two guys in this book. I don't really want to say much else about it because there's like a few twists and turns, but it's just really interesting going back and forth between like her falling in love then and her falling in love now. And it's kind of like, which guy are you rooting for? There's a big twist which like changed like what I was thinking. It's quite like emotional towards the end. I did really enjoy this one, and I didn't see the twist coming either, so I feel like that's a good sign of a book. Yeah, this was a good solid romance with some twists. I would also just say to check the trigger warnings as well beforehand before you read this. So the next book that I read was We Hunt the Flame by Hafsah Faizal. I hope I said that right. And it's about this girl called Zafira. She lives in this land that used to be beautiful. Everyone had lots of magic. Then something happened and her land where she lives now is like barren. It's snow covered and they really struggle to get food. And then she gets sent on this quest to find this artifact. And she's told that if she finds it, she's going to restore magic to the kingdom where she lives. But there's other people searching for this artifact as well. There's a guy called Nazir. Again, like I hope I'm saying all these names right. But he's after it as well. They're kind of trekking to this island where people haven't been in like years, and there's like bad creatures that they need to fight against. They discover that there's still this like ancient evil which is like working against them. The whole story is about whether they can get this artifact, but also like they're going after this artifact separately but bump into each other along the way. So it's like, can they trust each other? So yeah, I really found the premise of this book like a really good idea, and I did enjoy it to start with, but for some reason I just didn't quite connect with it. I don't know if it was like the pace, I don't know what it was, but I feel like I've read other fantasy books that I've just enjoyed more, but a lot of other people love it, so it might be one to try. The next book I read was The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. Mariana Zapata is like the queen of slow burn romances. So like enemies to lovers, but really slow. Like the character development is always really good. This one is about a girl called Vanessa and a guy called Aiden. So Vanessa works for Aiden. She's like his assistant. He's a big football player and she always works really hard for him, but he's always really grumpy. It fits the like grumpy sunshine trope as well. In the end, she decides to quit. And then a few months after she's quit, he comes to her and is like begging her to come and work for him again. I don't want to give too much away. She ends up living in the house, so it's like forced proximity as well. I really enjoy a romance that seems really realistic. So it's not like insta love straight away. They've gone from like being enemies to lovers. It actually happened really naturally. You see slowly how his feelings like develop for her. This isn't really giving anything away because I feel like all of her books are like that. Like you kind of know where it's going, but it's a really satisfying ending because you've waited so long for it. She's also friends with like one of his best friends, so there's like a little bit of jealousy there. The best friend lives with them in the house as well, and they're going from like boss to friends to maybe something more, so there's like a whole progression. Even though it's so big, I got through it so quick. So yeah, this is definitely one of my favorites of the month. I really enjoyed this one. So the next one I read was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. This was literally one of my favorites of the month. I really enjoyed this book. I went into it with high expectations because I've seen it all over Book Talk, and yeah, it didn't disappoint. So basically this book starts off with the main girl, Olive. She's at her sister's wedding. Her sister's called Amy, and the groom's brother is called Ethan, and Olive and Ethan just don't get on at all. They've never got on, but they're the only ones at the wedding to coincidentally not eat the buffet. And then later on in the day, everyone who ate the buffet, including the bride and groom, get really ill, like from food poisoning. So Amy, who's the bride, is literally there being sick, and she says they're about to go on their honeymoon and they just can't go on it because they're too ill. She doesn't want it to go to waste, so she says to Olive, like, please, will you take the holiday? Like, you deserve a holiday. But the groom has also said this to his brother Ethan, so they end up, Olive and Ethan, going on this holiday together. This doesn't spoil anything because it happens like really early on in the book. They have to pretend to be a bride and groom who just got married so that they can check into the hotel and keep the holiday. So it's like fake dating, forced proximity because there's only one room in the hotel. They also bump into some other people there, which makes it awkward. They have to keep pretending that they're dating. And there were some really funny moments as well. Like, I remember one moment I actually laughed like out loud, and like don't normally do that with books. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. It was like enemies to lovers, but done in a really fun way. This is like one of my favourite books of the month, and I can't wait to read more books by Christina Lauren. So next I read The Mistake by Elle Kennedy, and this is the second book in the Off-Campus series. So The Deal is the first one, then The Mistake, then The Score, then I haven't carried on after that, so I'm not sure what the fourth one is. The series is about a group of guy friends, and like each book focuses on a different guy and their potential relationship with someone. So this book is about a guy called John and a girl called Grace. He kind of accidentally ends up in Grace's like student room at uni, and he almost takes her virginity. So it's quite a big thing for her, and then they don't see each other for like the whole of the summer break. They're kind of on like bad terms after that, and then it's about what happens when they come back. I don't want to go too much more into detail than that, but it's like him trying to win her back. You think she's going to be all innocent because she hasn't had many experience with boys, but actually she's like keeping him on his toes. So then I read The Score, which is the third book in the series. So it's about a guy called Dean and a girl called Allie. Dean is like another one of these guys in the friendship group. Allie is Hannah from the first book's friend, and something starts up between them, but kind of like really casual at first. Like she doesn't want anything serious because she's just come out of a really like toxic relationship, and he's not into that either. Like he just like sleeps around with loads of different girls. He's like a proper player. It's like, are they going to get together? Are they going to be able to get over the fact they're both determined, like they don't want a proper relationship? So yeah, that rounds up the 3 that I've read so far of the Off-Campus series, and I thought I'd kind of like rate them all at the same time. I really enjoyed the first one. I read that like a while ago, and that was my favourite by far. The second one, I feel like dipped a bit for me. I just wasn't as interested. I didn't really get into the story as much. And then this third one was like a bit better. And I have read that a lot of people liked the third one better than the second one. I think it was just because I had such high expectations from reading the first one. And sometimes that really like does you dirty. Like when you go into it with expectations, it's hard for it to live up to that. So yeah, maybe I'll read the fourth one and then come back and see if that was any better. So the next book I read was Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. And this has now become one of my favourite books of all time. The synopsis of the book, you would think it was going to be really boring. And to be honest, it started like a bit slow and I was like, is this going to be really boring? And then I just got gripped by it. Like I literally couldn't stop reading it. I stayed up one night till like 4 a.m. just because I really got into the story. The writing was just beautiful as well. There were so many quotes in there that I was like, wow, that is just like written so well. So this book is about Kaya, who is named the Marsh Girl. The story starts, she's living out with her family in the marsh. They live away from everyone else and she really doesn't have like the best upbringing. In the end, it's just her living in the marsh by herself. For one reason or another, her family just aren't there anymore. And she's really like isolated from society and she just avoids everyone. And then she slowly creates a bond with like a boy that lives nearby. It's really lovely to see this bond that she has because it's kind of the only connection that she has to like the town. Like she doesn't go to school, she doesn't go to the shops, she just has like a real connection with like the marsh because she's lived there her whole life and it's almost like the marsh looks after her. And then you're also flicking back and forth between her growing up, so throughout the decades, and then present day where someone has been killed, and then gradually the stories are getting closer and closer. So you're watching her grow up and this timeline is almost about to intersect with present day where they're trying to solve a murder. So it has a little bit of like murder mystery in it as well. But I was so invested. I just want everyone to read this so that I can talk to everyone about what happens at the end. So this was recommended to me by a friend, and since this, I've made my best friend read it and my mum read it, and they both really enjoyed it as well. So definitely I would put this on your to read list. So next I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, which I've seen all over BookTok recently. That's why I decided to pick it up. I've actually only just given it back to the library, which is really bad timing. But this book is about Addie, and back when she was living in like the 1700s, she makes a deal with the devil, and the consequences of that is that no one remembers her. Even her own family, when she goes back to them, have no idea who she is. So she ends up living this really isolated life. So you're following that journey when it happens, and then you're also following like present day 300 years later. So she's living in modern society and she bumps into this guy in a bookshop called Henry who remembers her. So you're trying to find out why. But I would say with this book, the problem is that I went into it wanted to cry. Like, I don't know if it's just me, but I really enjoy a book or get like satisfaction out of it if it like makes me cry. And this, it just didn't do that. Like, I felt a bit sad towards the end, but I was expecting to be sobbing. Like, the videos that I've seen on BookTok, people are like crying their eyes out. That is what I wanted, and I didn't get it. So I still thought it was a really good book, but for that reason it kind of fell short. And the other thing I would say is that it was switching back and forth between like in the 1700s and then present day as well, and I enjoyed the present day more than I did the other part of the book. I always find it really annoying when you're going back and forth between like two different points of view or two different times in the book and you enjoy one more than the other, and so when it switches back to the one that you don't like, you're like, oh damn, like we've just carried on with that one. So that wasn't great for me either, but a lot of people love it, so give it a go if you want to read something a bit different, something a little bit like magical. Yeah. So next was November 9 by Colleen Hoover, and this one is about a girl called Fallon and a guy called Ben. Fallon is in a cafe with her dad one day and they get into a bit of an argument over her like following her dreams, and this guy just comes and like intercepts and pretends to be her boyfriend and stands up for her against her dad, which I did think was like slightly unrealistic. But after that they carry on talking and they get on really well, and this is Fallon's last day in LA before she moves away. And so they decide that because they really got on and they still want to see each other, they're going to meet up on the same day every year, but with no contact in between. But the thing I found with this book, the twists were just like so crazy. I almost feel like the twists got slightly in the way of the emotion for me, because I was just too like shocked to be feeling like upset. I still really enjoyed this book. Like, I've always enjoyed a Colleen Hoover book. There's never been one that I've disliked, so yeah. So next I read Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This book is about a girl, Brie. She has just lost her mum. That isn't a spoiler because that happens like straight away. So I would check the trigger warnings around that. And one thing that I would say is that this book really dealt with it like really sensitively. So I really appreciated that. But yeah, it's about this girl, Brie. She's just lost her mum. She has gone away to, I think they call it early college. It's before university. So she's only 16. Within her first few days there, she witnesses a guy using magic, and this guy realizes and he attempts to wipe her memory. It doesn't work. And then that kind of unlocks this like side of her that she didn't know that's linked to this magic. She starts to investigate more because she is convinced that it is related to her mum's death. So there were quite a few positives about this book. I really thought the author like just dealt really well and really sensitively with a lot of topics. Things like grief that Brie goes through, like trauma, her race, like her different struggles in life. But then there were also just a few negatives for me. One of the main ones was that I just found it like a bit confusing in places. So it's talking about the origins of like this society and where the magic came from. And there were just so many terms, there were a lot of different characters, a lot of names, and I was just like, am I being a bit stupid because I kept forgetting? Another thing as well, Brie, the main character, like wasn't falling for the person that I wanted her to, and I think that's me just being a bit stupid, but I envisioned like who I wanted her to fall for, and she wasn't falling for that person. So yeah, but I still really enjoyed this book, and I would give it a go if you want a fantasy book that's a bit different, really modern as well. So next I read Bad Habit by Charleigh Rose. This one is brother's best friend trope. This book is about a girl called Briar, and her brother's best friend is Asher, and he has a really bad home life. He often comes around to their house to spend time with them, to get away from home. They have a real connection when they're younger. Like, her brother doesn't realise there's something a little bit more between them, even though there is an age gap. It's about 3 years. So at the beginning of the book, she is quite young compared to him. But then he leaves one day and he never says bye to her. And 3 years has passed and now he's come back. And now that he's come back, he really hates her for some reason. They're both really hating one another because she's annoyed he never said bye, he just left without a word. And then he's come back and he hates her, but you have no idea why. You gradually find out a bit more like the reason why he's annoyed at her. And you also find out like what she's been up to like in the meantime. So yeah, this also fits into the enemies to lovers trope as well. But I just felt for me that there was almost too much of that deliberate miscommunication. I feel like sometimes authors put it in there as like one of them hates the other one for a reason that you don't know. It just feels a bit unnecessary and like a bit forced. I did have really high hopes for it because I really like the brother's best friend trope, but this wasn't my favourite of the month. It was still okay though. So the last book that I read was Enemies by Tijan. I think that's how you say it. So this book is about a girl called Dusty who moves away to university. She is trying to start over in life. She moves into this house and straight away just really does not get on with the girls in her house because they're all friends with these football players who are like really rowdy all the time. And her childhood best friend, this guy called Stone, is also at the same university. He's also now really famous as a football player, so everyone at uni knows him. They were childhood best friends, and then things happened and their families now hate each other, so they now hate each other as well. And then some terrible things happen to her, and because he's the only one that knows her on the campus, like he feels an obligation to try and like be there for her, even though they now really don't get on. But I don't know, for me, I just feel like so much happens to this girl in like quite quick succession, like so many horrible things. And this is what I was saying about Legendborn. That character was like going through trauma, and that was dealt with like really sensitively and quite slow and really went into depth with it. Whereas this just seemed to skim over everything. That was a real sticking point for me. Like I just couldn't really get past that in the book. It's annoying because I always have really high expectations for enemies to lovers because I really enjoy that type of book, and I really enjoy it when it's set at like university or like college as well. But I couldn't get past all of the things that were happening to this character, so I would definitely check the trigger warnings. But yeah, that sums up all of the books that I read in August. So thank you so much for watching my first video. I really want to do more book videos. I want to do some book recommendations for different tropes. I want to do a video about how I'm going to start documenting what books I read instead of on just Goodreads. So if you've got any videos that you really want to see, let me know, or if you've got any recommendations, I'd love to hear. I always love new recommendations. It just gets me really excited. I've just started a new Instagram. I'm not going to use the one that I had like at school. I'm starting afresh, and I'm going to be putting more about books on there. So if you want to follow me, I'll leave that link down below. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.